Hey, grade fives. Today, I'm going to teach you about bar graphs. Now, you may think that this is completely unrelated to collecting data, which is what we did yesterday. I taught you how to make Google Forms yesterday. But by the end of today's lesson, I hope you realize that collecting data is just the first step in being able to create a bar graph. So by the end of today's class, you should know what a bar graph is. You should also know what they're used for. And then we're going to teach you how to make one. And we're actually going to use the data that you collected yesterday in your Google Forms to create your very own bar graph. Okay, so let's start by talking about what a bar graph actually is. Bar graphs are a way of visually representing data where you are comparing two or more different categories. Okay, so for example, I've seen a lot of bar graphs used for comparing like average daily income in different countries, like this one here. Um, of course, whenever I'm teaching you what something is, it's always helpful to compare what it isn't as well. And in statistics and probability in this unit, there's actually a second type of graph called a histogram that looks very similar to a bar graph, but there are some key differences. So I just want to spend a little bit of time here going over the differences between a histogram and a bar graph. So first of all, you'll notice on a bar graph has gaps or spaces between the bars on the actual the graph. You can see here that there's a green bar and a blue bar, and there is some space between those bars. Whereas a histogram, there will be no gaps between the bars. Now, the reason that is because a bar graph, by definition, is used to compare different categories of information, comparing incomes by country, and each of these countries is a different category. Okay, a histogram, on the other hand, is used to track data from a single category. Um, and so that's why there's no separation between those bars. It's because they all belong to the same category. It might just be over time or something else like that. Okay. So for today's lesson, we are comparing categories, and each bar represents a different category for comparison. Okay. So that's what a bar graph is, what it's used for, comparing two different categories or two or more different categories. Of course, we do want to just talk about the parts of a bar graph. So every bar graph has, I'm going to call it like 5 different parts. So you should have a title. That way, whoever is looking at your graph can read the title and know instantly what kind of information they could read off of your graph. So you should have a title. Um, Up the left-hand side here, this is called the y-axis, and up the y-axis, you should have a scale. And the scale would just most often be numbers. So in this case, it's the number of students. Um, that got a certain test result, right? Because that's what this graph is. The scale, like this is kind of a tricky concept, and we're not really going to cover it much in grade 5. It's something that you'll cover more in later grades. But like if we had 0, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million up the side here, that's not a practical scale because there's probably not a school in the world that has like a million students in it, right? So you always want to pick a scale that is appropriate for the numbers that you are counting. All right. And in this case, looks like the highest number goes up to just above 15. Maybe that's 16 students that got a B on this test. So you would want to choose a scale that goes just above 16. And if we're using nice round numbers like counting up by fives, then the number that would be just above that, counting by fives, would be 20. So that's how they chose this appropriate scale. Okay. So yeah, you have a label on the y-axis to tell you what you're counting, and then you have a label on the x-axis. That's the one down here that runs across the graph, and this label tells you what the different categories are that you are comparing. Okay, and in this case, it is different letter grades on the test. Okay, so let's summarize. You have a title, you have an appropriate scale, you have labels for the y-axis and the x-axis, and then of course the final part of your graph would be actually drawing in the bars to represent the data in each group. Okay, so bar graphs, uses for them. Sometimes you can create a little bit of humor using bar graphs. So this is the chances of doing something wrong. And if you're by yourself, you can see that there's like 0% chance or zero chance that you're going to do anything wrong. But of course, when everyone is watching, you're going to have an epic fail, right? So that's, you can create some humor using bar graphs. But more often, bar graphs are used for collecting actual data, for research, for school projects. So let's say you're doing a school project where you want to take inventory of what colors of M&Ms come in a bag of M&Ms. And this is a graph that would show you that information. And so right away, just by looking at this graph, we can see some very useful information. We can see that the most common type of M&M found in this bag was orange. We can also see that the least common type of M&M was brown. And then we can also see kind of all of the relative amounts of each color. Might be kind of interesting to try this experiment on your own and make your own bar graph out of it to see if your graph looks anywhere close to this graph, which I just pulled off of the internet, by the way. Okay, so now let's connect to yesterday's lesson. Yesterday, I taught you how to make a Google form. And so your assignment for yesterday was to make a form and send it out to a few of your friends. And then I also taught you that there was this tab up top for responses. So I'm going to go here, responses. Now, I, I just made this. I didn't actually get a chance to send it out. But if you have sent yours out, there would be some charts and some information right here on the middle of your screen with that information. What you can do with that, though, is you can see that there's a green button right here. And if I click on that, what that does is it'll take you to a spreadsheet of all of the responses. And so over here on the timestamp, it'll tell you like the time that the person responded to your survey. Because I just made this information up, this column is completely blank for me. But that's okay, because we don't actually need that information to make ourselves a bar graph, okay? So what you should have, now, if you sent out your survey to like 100 different people and you got some responses back here, what you can then do is you can highlight this entire column, okay? So I'm just going to highlight all the way down here. And the top row here says favorite pizza. That was what my question was. What is your favorite type of pizza? So this row number one here is just the heading. You still want to include that in what you're highlighting, but then everything below that would be what people have responded to your question, okay? And so once you've highlighted that row of information, over here, there is a button, and I'm just actually, let me highlight it just so it's easier for you to see. Right up here, there's a button, and it looks like a bar graph right there. It says insert chart. And if I click on that, it pops a graph right onto my screen. Now, the thing is, this is called a pie graph, and we aren't interested in making pie graphs today. We want to make a bar graph. So if you click over here on the right-hand side, it says chart type. We're going to switch it. Now, there's, I guess, I've been talking about bar graphs, and if you go down here to where it says bar, it actually makes bars that go across your page in the horizontal direction. We actually, even though they're technically called bar graphs for today, we actually want to make a column graph. That makes them go vertical up and down, okay? So by clicking on that, you can see that it switches my graph type. The nice thing about Google Sheets is that it automatically titles your graph for you. If you like the title, you can go ahead and leave it. If you don't like the title name, you can change it. You can just double click on it and it'll allow you to change the title name. It also inserts a label down here, the count of favorite pizza. I don't actually like that, so I'm going to change it to type of pizza. All right. And in my opinion, that's just, a more appropriate label for my x-axis here. And then I actually haven't found a good way to put wow. Third time's a charm here. Let's try one more time here. Pizza. There we go. Yeah, I haven't found a way of putting a label on the y-axis, and that's just maybe one of the shortcomings of Google Slides here. If you can find out a way to do that, I would love to hear it, okay? But you'll see that they've put a scale up the y-axis here, counting by tens, and of course, we have just over 30 Hawaiian pizza lovers here in my data, so the scale goes just beyond that to the next number that they're counting up by. You'll notice they're counting up by tens here, which should always be a consistent number. Doesn't have to be 10, but if you choose counting by tens, make sure you count up by tens, okay? Okay, and then the last thing for today, guys, is your assignment. You can access your assignment from Google Classroom, and when you open up your assignment, it's just three simple little questions that look like this. Question one says, please copy and paste your bar graph into this space. So if you go back to here, you can right click on this. You know what? You can't do that. So you know what? If you click on it, and so the graph is highlighted, if you hit Command C or Control C, and then you just go over to your assignment and click inside of this square here and hit Control V. And then it'll, link to spreadsheet. There. So I've just pasted my graph into that, and that's what you're supposed to do for your assignment. And then you'll also notice there's 2 questions down below, which I would also like you to answer before you turn it in to me, okay? That's your lesson for today, how to make a bar graph, and that's your assignment for today, inserting your bar graph with your data and answering those questions. So I hope that all makes sense. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, okay? Bye.